yes. And welcome to City Business. This is James Moore, KRUU-FM, 100.1 in your local FM dial range here. Also on the World Wide Web machine at KRUU-FM.com. Joining us in the studio, Jason Strong of FMC, and also Michael Halley from the City Council, Fourth Ward City Council person. And we're going to get a sum up of what went down last night at City Hall. Michael, how you doing today?
Good. Glad to be here.
Good to see you. Glad you got in. We had a mysterious situation. Our normal way didn't quite work. We'll leave it at that. But anyway, good to see you.
Yeah, we made it just in time. Well, I've got two meetings to cover. Remember, we had a special meeting on May 4th.
Excellent.
Very brief, 15 minutes. Essentially, the backstory is that the city had wanted to refinance some old debt to find a better interest rate, which always is great because no one likes paying interest. It's like not anyone's favorite thing to do. And we had the bond rating that Moody's had given the city, Baa3, negative outlook, which would not have been advantageous to then go out into the bond market with that rating. So the city council and the city administrator, Mike Harmon, have been working hard, creating fiscal policy and doing everything that essentially Moody's and even our auditor and such have been asking of us to improve our financial outlook. And the results were very positive when we went to one of the top three. Moody's is one, and Standard & Poor's is another municipal bond rating agency. We went to Standard & Poor's. They gave us an A rating. So that is the equivalent of, I think, a 2A or something in Moody's. So it was basically going up 4 spots.
Great.
From what Moody's had given us last time. With that A rating, we were able to refinance these old loans and save over the next 5 years, I think, on these loans, $285,000 in interest.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. So thank you for not the bond agency, really, because you can't thank them. They're indifferent about it. But I want to thank Mike Harmon especially for coming in, city administrator, less than 2 years ago. It's been about a year and a half. Came into a situation where, just like so many times on the federal level, someone inherits the predecessor's situation. We'll just put it that. And has to do what you have to do, roll up your sleeves and get to work. So Mike is very intelligent and practical and has just really done a great job righting the ship, so to speak. We weren't completely off course, but there were just these little course corrections essentially to get us back on track. And I guess essentially it was the cash balance was too low in our reserves. And we bumped that up by the sale of Logan Apartments, which is a one-time influx of cash. You can't do that repeatedly. And so the idea is to keep that in reserve, not to spend it. So that's not, we didn't just say, hey, we've got money, let's have a party or let's go do something. It's sitting in there as the bond rating agency prefers and as the city prefers. It's good to have cash on hand. It helps you and when you have small expenses, not to have to borrow for them. So you save interest that way.
Kind of like a rainy day fund.
Yep. Just have it there, leave it there. And then also all the city departments are staying within budget this year. And we were able to take the emergency levy off the city's levy for next fiscal year, which is the first time in a long time that that's come off. So levy rate's down. And also that shows we're not considering ourselves in emergency mode. I don't think it's a funny term. It wasn't really an emergency that it was used for. I guess it's something a lot of cities do use, but we wanted to take that off of there. So we took that off the city's levy and added a 2% contingency, which was never done before. And that's, again, pragmatic because you never know. You know, you have your budget and the year progresses and unforeseen expenses arise. So
like sinkholes,
like little sinkholes on corner of Main and
Sinkhole de Mayo,
Main and Broadway. Yep.
Is there any word on that? Not that you.
Well, it was a water line had burst and washed away the soil underneath, and that's what caused that. I know I was very fascinated by it as well. I must have driven by like 5 or 6 times with my kids. I'm like, is it getting deeper? What do you see? You know?
Well, they did a big job repairing it, obviously, when they broke it out, but that was it. So that, in other words, it's probably isolated to that.
Yeah, they're going
incidents.
in, fix the water line, and then they'll pour concrete in there. So that was the May 6th meeting.
Okay.
And that's, again, very positive news. It'll be really interesting when we approach Moody's. Say, all right, let's see what you guys give us. I'm sure it'll be an increase, but how much it will be, we're not sure. All righty, May 9th, that's last night.
Yep.
City Council regular meeting. Basic, very simple one, but a good one. We had an employee at the fire department who was a full-time employee for years and years, now stepping down, and he's now become part-time. So Steve Winslow, I just want to thank you for your years of service, dedicated service to the Fairfield Fire Department, and the fact that he's staying on shows that he's very committed to the department. We will be then needing another full-time driver, and
that's such an important thing, huh?
yeah, we just want to always have somebody
good to
on
have
call
experience
or
too.
Yeah, and he was great. He did a lot of extra work beyond what was expected of him. And we also had we have a new dispatcher.
Oh, at the police,
a communication specialist at the police department. So that's a positive.
Which has been our kind of revolving.
It has. It's a tough one to fill. So hope, knock on wood, this one works out. And Park and Rec hired seasonal park employees. We do this every spring, summer. Got to mow those lawns and keep things in shape.
Know all about that, folks.
Yep. All right. So we had 2 public appearances. One was a representative from Alliant Energy. Her name is Nancy Snad. It's a D and a T.
Oh, Snad.
Snad. Yeah. That's a chocolate.
That is. It must be German.
Yeah. So Nancy came to talk about
maybe Dutch.
A rebate program. Now, they do this with residential customers and commercial customers. Anytime somebody gets an Energy Star rated upgrade, you get a new furnace, they offer a rebate, because for them it's good business. They're in the energy business, and they rather avoid having to produce more energy. It's really interesting. They don't want to have to build more plants and have more capacity, so they incentivize, they give you money if you actually go from an energy hog or something that's not as efficient to something more efficient. And they said, she gave us some stats, and the city of Fairfield is well ahead of the curve in terms of taking advantage of these incentives.
Cool.
She said for a town our size, we used a lot of them last year. One such example of another model they use, which is getting them involved in the design of a new building to find those efficiencies. I forget the exact name of the program, but we did that with the indoor rec center. And they projected a certain amount of savings based on the energy efficiency upgrades that we made. And they were projecting about $26,000 that they would then be able to rebate. And the reality, or the real number, came in at 33 because now that it's up and running, it's proven to be more efficient than the model. The model had a range of how efficient, and it was right at the top, like almost exactly at the top of kind of what they'd hoped how it would function. So
excellent.
Built-in energy efficiency from the beginning is really the way to go, because then you're not trying to retrofit something. I wasn't in any way, and the city wasn't in any way involved in the construction of the convention center. And I know that is a tricky one to try to make more efficient because of the way it was built. So it's better to do these things at the time you're building. So good job, Alliant, for
and of
partnering.
course, we've also learned a lot more since the convention center was built, probably.
Yeah.
If not learn more, I mean, that was 10 years ago.
It's a very different facility.
Yeah.
I mean, our rec center has few windows. You know, it's got the frosted kind of windows along the top, and it's rectangular. It's one big space. It's a very, very different building.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
A little apples and oranges, but also just the general point is, when you're starting, if you can start right, if you can afford to start right and do it properly, it's built in. It's because anytime you retrofit, I mean, I'd love to build some passive solar or passive heating underneath a building, but boy, when you've already got the building over it,
it's tricky.
It's just,
Yeah.
again,
Yep.
so that it's a point well taken.
But what was interesting, you mentioned the word afford, and that's why this rebate program exists, is that the expense to upgrade can be negated by these rebates. So
Offset,
I don't think we actually spent more on the building because of the rebates.
Mhm.
We got back whatever the investment we made, and then we'll continue to have
Going forward.
savings with the energy.
Awesome.
All right. I also heard from a developer out of Cedar Rapids, Jim Hobart. He's got a company. His company is family business. He's involved. And he said 2 sons are involved. They mostly renovate historic buildings, but they were asked by the Economic Development Association, FEDA, Fairfield Economic Development Association, reached out and requested they look at potentially some housing developments here in town. So they looked at all the available land, and the land that they decided upon is, if you know where the new bank across from the hospital, Pilot
Yep.
Grove Bank. So the road that accesses that is called Lincoln Avenue, and it kind of runs parallel north-south to Main Street, and then it turns east-west. So this land is north of that very eastern portion of Lincoln Avenue, if that makes any sense. Essentially north of the bank, south of a church that's out there. I can't remember exactly the name of the church, but the land is actually kind of L-shaped.
Mm-hmm.
They want to start by building south of the church, and then they've got more room further east. And the style they've decided on is essentially, I don't want to say mimicking, but using the similar format as Southgate, where it's one building with 4 units. And they found that would be the price point that people could afford and seem to enjoy. That Southgate's always been well lived in, and
Well stocked.
well populated. It's, and that was a development that was a kind of I think a type of spec development.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't pre-sold, and that's what this would be. So they'd start with one unit, one building, and one unit would be their office. They'd sell the other 3, and then they do more as demand came. So,
And how many would they be
I
potentially?
remember. I
able
think
to
it was
do?
up to, I'm going to say 40
Okay. So
units,
10 such units.
yeah, 10 buildings.
And by the way, we're not holding you to that. I'm just asking.
Yeah,
'cause-
that's my memory.
Mhm.
But so the Economic Development Committee on the council met and discussed, and as always, developers are looking for incentives, looking for rebates and tax abatement, that kind of thing. So this proposal, the initial proposal that we discussed last night but did not vote on, included the city creating an urban renewal district, the tax increment finance, the TIF district, capturing the increment and using that money, a portion of it, and the early estimates say less than half of what we'd actually capture, we'd spend on getting water. The sewer's, I think, pretty much already there, and road access, extending the road and sidewalks. And that would be the city paying for that and then paying it off with the increment. It also included, and this made me uncomfortable personally, and this is what the discussion was, it also included abatement, which was unusual because usually when you do a TIF, you don't also abate, because when you abate, you are subtracting from the increment that you're going to get. If you say, all right, we'll forgive this amount of your property tax, you don't have that anymore to capture, to use, to utilize, to pay off the debt or whatnot. So I told the developer, I'm not against this. I want to see this happen, but I want to make sure this agreement makes sense. And what really kind of the red flag that went off was that our current policy prohibits both. You can't have an urban renewal district and enjoy our tax abatements. It's one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So then after the meeting, someone's like, well, that's not entirely true. It's maybe doesn't have to, not have to amend our policy. That, I think, was what concerned me, is when you amend the policy, then we've set a precedent for all the other developers. Like, okay, I want a TIF and I want an abatement, just like you gave that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously everything is always done case by case. And obviously we want to encourage this development, and it won't cost the city anything. whatever the cost of infrastructure improvements will be paid for by the new increment. And it's written into the language, whatever percentage of the total that they're telling us they're going to build, they don't build, they owe that portion of the construction cost. So they did half and we spent $200,000, they'd owe us $100,000. They did a quarter, they'd owe us $150,000. That we're only covering a like percentage of the cost to what they actually build. It's not my favorite type of TIF policy. I like the one that we're doing with North Campus Village much better. They build it out. The properties are on the tax roll. Then we capture the increment and a rebate. So there's never any speculation for the city. There's never any borrowing for the city. It's a kind of more of a rebate over time. So there's never any potential loss. And this, with the agreement, it also covers the city, but we will have to borrow to do those improvements. That's not terrible, but as long as everything's covered, it could be okay.
And so that's why we have that other fund, I guess, that you were just talking about. So it'd be borrowing against would it possibly using some of this, or is that a different, that's a Moody's thing?
We'd have to take out, but they would be general obligation bonds. Mm-hmm. So now that we got the higher rating, we get a good interest rate. So that's not really the concern. It's just
the idea of it.
The idea of it. We really worked hard when I was on the Economic Development Committee a couple of years ago, up until last year, creating that policy because we wanted something that would incentivize development, but at the same time keep the city out of that speculation aspect. And again, because this agreement includes that clause that if it's not built the way it's described, if they only do a percentage, they owe the rest. That does cover the city. And I knew Mike Harmon, I knew our city administrator would include language like that. But at the same time, the other way we did it it seemed so much simpler, and it really use the word incentive a lot, but it did create the incentive for the developer to get the properties built because they couldn't get anything back until the properties were built and on the tax roll.
So was this decided or discussed?
Discussed. So they'll come back with something more legit.
Okay.
But I think it's going back to committee. Apparently committee was also a little concerned about granting a TIF and an abatement. So we'll
great. That's good detail. City Business. This is Michael Halley. I'm James Moore. You're listening to Solar Powered KRUU-FM. We have FMC, also videotaping in the house, and appreciate Jason, the good work they do there for bringing the whole shebang live and in Technicolor rebroadcast if you're interested as well. Again, you can check out City Business the day after each city council session, the following lunchtime, 12:30, Thursday dinner time, 6:30 p.m., and then the following Monday morning breakfast time if you're an early riser, 6:30 a.m. And Michael Halley, we do appreciate you coming in. What else you got?
All right. Well, the water utility department wanted to create an official policy for delinquent accounts. They would carry these unpaid bills for years, and it just kind of messed up the books. So they want to be able to write it off internally, so their books are a little cleaner. But it's not the same as debt forgiveness. It's not debt forgiveness. At some point,
it's accounting, really.
Yeah, it's accounting. So we approved that, but the list of debt or a list of unpaid bills for the last 5 years that was listed, it was just pages and pages and pages, and most were under 200. One was over 1,500. I don't know if that's a commercial. I don't know how that happened, but a lot of times it just goes out to an agency, collection agency, because the city doesn't have the resources to hunt down people who have moved away. But if they come back, it's kind of like I likened it to the late fees at the movie place. You're like, okay, fine, I'm not going to pay those, so you can't rent anything. But then if you want to come back and rent something, and they put your name in the system, like, oh, you have $250 worth of unpaid, do you want to pay that now? It'll be the same. If somebody comes back and opens an account, then it's like, oh, well, you still owe us X amount.
That makes sense.
So we passed that. Again, it was an internal bookkeeping issue. 2 ordinances. One passed to its final reading, and that's making the Park and Rec Board an advisory board.
which you've been talking about.
Yeah, we've talked about. 1972 ordinance gave them all sorts of authority, or the Park and Rec Department. They really weren't exercising it. And so now the amendment matches what's going on. So hiring and firing would be the city administrator rather than the board. And the board would still, actually, we're expanding it from 5 to 7 members, and they're still very important and need that board to look into the department, look into potential efficiencies, look into potential new programs, advise on the rate structure, all these kind of things. So they'll still be very, very active. There'll just be that extra step of, before a new rate structure is adopted, it'll come before council. And like that example I used where I brought up this concern about the potential development agreement, the more brains you have, the more minds you have looking at an issue, it's not always better. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen, but a lot of times in this kind of thing, it is good to have more people looking. And because the council are representatives of the people, then we always try to represent what's best for the common good. Not that the park board didn't, but it's slightly different dynamic. So I think it's a positive that these issues of things like user fees that I get asked about all the time, and before this ordinance passed, I'd say I have no authority. I don't even know when they go up. I hear about it after the fact, just like the rest of us. Now, as people's representative, I can represent them, and also things like hours. You know, some people want the gym to be open till 9, and so it's a numbers game. Well, how early do you open, and how much does it cost to stay open an extra hour versus how much revenue would you bring in? Where you open an extra hour? Those kind of things are always tricky, but everyone has essentially kind of holes in their thinking. No one sees everything. There's no one person who we could make supreme leader of the world who would get everything right. It just doesn't work. That's why you have groups, and we fill in those gaps for each other, and then collectively we make good decisions. So that's my hope, is that now that this extra step is in there, that the council will have that extra level of, whatever you want to call it, scrutiny, or just extra thought on these issues. And then we went to the second reading of our blade sign ordinance. This is just the signs around the central business district, that are perpendicular to the building, so that they're more or less for pedestrians. You know, the flat signs that face the road are great if you're driving, but if you're walking, you can see that on video, but I'm craning my neck for the listeners, trying to look up at the building. But a blade sign, boom, it tells you, it's not just necessarily the name of the building, it just tells you what it is. So cafe, or books, or fine dining, or whatever. And it's just a great little, it's great for a tourist, for one, but it's also helpful for locals. So we want to encourage that. We've kind of eased the restrictions in height and allowed them to be a little bigger. Now the Visitors Bureau is going to offer a grant for anybody who wants to do blade signs. They'll help them get like at least the brackets, and then they can order
So the
their
brackets
signs.
Will be similar?
Yeah, but just more or less it just helps with the expense. We're not mandating this, and we are not mandating a certain look. We will, the Visitors Bureau will create a pamphlet that has both the ordinance rules and then some kind of guidelines of suggestions. But the idea is that Fairfield is an eclectic community. We're not going to go with the homogenous type look.
Well, gosh, when you think of how beautiful Revelations, Cafe Paradiso, and some of these Bluefish others have done
non-traditional
with their designs, it's really quite inspiring.
It is. It's a really nice non-traditional.
So to mandate, I mean, I always get a little nervous in communities where I see this sort of similar thing. There is a certain uniformity that way, but it's a little bit not quite as eclectic. But then, I always favor eclectic myself.
Yeah, so. I was in Naperville, Illinois, and downtown by the train stop, and there's a very uniform look, and it's pretty in a way, but it is what it is. Good for those communities.
Yeah.
I don't think that's Fairfield. Alrighty, moving along. I gave an update, and this is important if you're listening today, Tuesday, or if you're watching this before Wednesday, the 11th, 4 o'clock. If you want to come be part of a little recognition of Fairfield and Jefferson County becoming home base Iowa community.
Okay.
It's that program that I was working on with Adam Plaguey and Ray Chambers, Veteran Affairs Director for Jefferson County. And it's just an incentive program to help veterans who are living outside the state to come back or relocate to Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with the employers in your area offering some sort of incentive, or just posting their job openings on the Home Base Iowa site. It's really what you say, kind of the least we could do. I've used that a lot. I recognize it's a little thing, but it also is something to kind of give back to the people who served and are now wanting to get back in society and live their lives as civilians. So we had a lot of local businesses step forward.
Great.
So on Wednesday, 4 o'clock, Jefferson County Courthouse courtroom, Lieutenant Governor will be there, and a representative from the Home Base Iowa program in Des Moines. We'll also have our very own Mayor Ed Malloy and County Supervisor Lee Dimmitt will speak briefly. And
what time again?
4 o'clock p.m.
4 p.m.
Yep.
Okay.
And then Troy Van Beek, who's a veteran himself
Mm-hmm.
and owns Ideal Energy, or president of Ideal Energy, will speak about the importance of hiring vets. It's not something he's made a priority for that company.
Fantastic.
So he was, like, I think our first taker when we brought this up. He's like, I'm already doing that, so I'm on board. So it'll be a nice little 30-minute program. I hope
Very
Jason
nice.
Strong will make it with his video camera. Right across the street from his new office,
Yep.
the upstairs.
And we're seeing nods from behind the camera.
Yep. So Jason and crew have moved. FMC headquarters is now in the convention center.
Nice.
In the, what's Rustic call it up there? The Sky Mall? Not the Sky Mall.
Sky Mall?
Not the Sky Mall. He calls it the Sky something.
The Heaven Cloud?
Yeah,
The Loft.
Yeah.
There we go.
He's
Well,
up there. He's got the corner office with the view.
Nice.
Yeah, I know.
The view in back.
The view in the back.
Well,
Well,
know
he's
what?
not going to be in there much. He's out and about.
That's right. And doing the good work. Well, anything else? Because we're just about out of time here.
The search process for the new Park and Rec director is
Underway?
going well. We Skype phone interviewed 7.
Wow.
We've narrowed it down to 5.
All right.
And if they all agree, we'll be doing live interviews here in person on the 26th.
Great.
Give them a tour of the facilities. They'll do a little meet and greet over the lunch hour.
Sweet. So that's
we'll-
moving forward.
Then
Great.
we'll do 1-hour interviews with each of them.
Great way to do it.
Yep. And hopefully that same day have a decision.
Well, that sounds good. Speaking of which, we're out of here. This is James Moore with KRUU-FM, solar-powered, people-powered radio. FMC in the house. Michael Halley, we appreciate you coming in and keeping us up to snuff on city business, and we'll be back in 2 weeks if the creek don't dry and we're still here. If the universe is still here. No, I'm not predicting anything. I better get out of here before I hurt myself. Thank you, Michael.